Hey everyone, we are going to go live at 6 o'clock with Shelf Discovery. We're just waiting and giving everybody a moment to get checked in, to get settled. A lot of you are just getting home from work, so we're going to give you a little time to get settled. But this is Shelf Discovery. I'm sitting in for Reverend Chris today. He's on vacation, and we're going to be talking about a book called The Untethered Soul right here. It's a book that's been out for a while by this author, Michael Singer. So we're going to start at 6 p.m. We're just waiting a couple minutes. So get comfortable. If you got the book close to you, we're going to be talking about chapter 2, which is Your Inner Roommate. So get comfy and we'll start in just a few moments. Hey Pam. Hey Gabron. Welcome. We're just a few minutes away from starting Shelf Discovery. And that is correct. It's not self-discovery, it's shelf discovery, because what we do every week is we take books, well, Chris takes books off of his bookshelf and discusses them with you. So this is very interactive. Actually, our time together is guided by your questions, your comments. Iger Braun from Tennessee, awesome. So we're going to get started in just a few moments. Good evening, Linda. Good to see you. Thanks, Gobron. It's getting a little long. I got to get it trimmed. All right, so it is 6 p.m. on the dot, at least here on the East Coast. Pam is asking, where was I last week? So many of you knew or may not know that YouTube and, Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram had issues last week. So we were unable to be with you. So here we are this week. Get what you came for. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about The Untethered Soul. I don't know if you can see it there. This book has been around for a while, and it's by this gentleman, Michael Singer, and the tagline is "The Journey Beyond Yourself." As a community, we're actually going through the pages of this book for 7 weeks. We're actually in week 2. So tonight we're going to be talking about chapter 2, and that's called Your Inner Roommate. So the way Shelf Discovery works is I'm going to read parts of this book, and I'm going to ask you to comment and chime in about your experience, what you think, your comments. There's no right or wrong answer. Our time together is guided by your comments and questions. So we're going to jump right in to page 20, and I'm going to read the first paragraph, which I think sums up nicely what this chapter is about. Your inner growth is completely dependent So he says completely, not partially. It's completely dependent upon the realization that the only way to find peace and contentment is to stop thinking about yourself. You're ready to grow when you finally realize that the I, who is always talking inside, will never be content. Can anybody relate to that? It always has a problem with something. Honestly, when was the last time you really had nothing bothering you? When was the last time you never had anything bothering you? Before you had your current problem, there was a different problem. And if you're wise, you will realize that after this one's gone, there will be another problem. The bottom line is, you'll never be free of problems until you are free from the part within that has so many problems. So who can relate to this? Who is a person here that is always finding problems with anything? You're almost looking at the world like, what needs to be fixed? This is wrong. This needs to be changed. Is there anybody out there? Am I the only one? Comment if you're one of these people that are always finding issues with everything. We sort of see this playing out on social media, don't we? You know, somebody can post something completely innocent, and then people come and comment with all of their opinions. This is wrong. This is right. They shouldn't have done this. They should do that. It's sort of like that roommate playing out in the comment section of social media. So we all have that inherent in us, this roommate, as Singer calls it, that has commentary on everything in our lives. Aurora gives a little praying hand. Yeah, it's almost like running the show, right? And what it does is stress us out on a daily basis. So instead of enjoying life the way it is, the way that God created things, we turn into sort of these problem solvers. This needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed. Linda says, well, I'm always trying to improve myself and keep my judgment of others to myself. Yes, there's nothing wrong with improving yourself. But on a daily basis, when that is your main focus, that you're constantly listening to that voice in your head that says, there's something wrong with you, you need to be fixed, you're not enough, that's when it becomes the issue. Because what happens? It robs us from our joy. It robs us from the moment. It robs us from peace. It robs us from being connected to our lovers, our brothers, our family. Pam says, I try to be positive, but doesn't always happen. Yeah, Pam, that voice in our head is also telling us that positive is good, right? That we need to remain positive because a good person is always positive. So I would invite people to be okay with maybe being negative once in a while, and try that on. Maybe it's just the spectrum of human life, or it's the spectrum of the world that we land somewhere on that spectrum, and it's not good and it's not bad. Singer goes on to say, nobody has ever truly become okay by changing things outside. Nobody has truly become okay by changing things outside of them. There's always the next problem. The only real solution is to take the seat of witness consciousness and completely change your frame of reference. So what he's saying there is, instead of believing that you're those thoughts, instead you become the witness, right? And you see those thoughts as sort of like a dialogue that's just happening in your head. You don't have to believe them. You don't have to agree with them. You don't even have to act on them. So imagine a world where somebody says, this is kind of radical, but like your friend comes up to you and says, you know, I'm having the thought that you're not a nice person. The world we live in now, since we believe this roommate in our head, we would crucify that person, right? How dare you have this idea of me? How dare you have this perception? But instead, what if it would be okay just to express what you're thinking without being attached to it? What would that be like for you? If your friend came up and said, I just wanted to share with you this thought that I'm having, this thought that this dialogue that my roommate's having about you. Would you react differently? Do you think that's even a world that's possible to live in, where we can just look at thoughts as what they are, as just thoughts? Comment in the comment section. I want to hear from you all what you think about this. Who out there is being tortured by this roommate that lives between our ears here? Who is acting on those thoughts? So put that in the comment section. As you're thinking about that, I just want to welcome anybody who's here that's just joining us for the first time or just checking in. This is Shelf Discovery. We're here every Monday night at 6 p.m. We pick a book. Usually Chris is doing this. I'm just sitting in for him. But we take a book. It's kind of hard to capture this on camera. We pick a book. Chris picks a book off his shelf, and then we talk about certain pages within, and then you comment and put your questions in the comment section, and that basically guides the experience. A little blurry here. Okay. And what we're talking about tonight is chapter 2 of this book, The Untethered Soul. And specifically, we're talking about the roommate. The author calls it the roommate because it's like this personality that lives in our head. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert here. That personality usually has the same voice and talks the same as your mom and dad, or the authority figure that you had growing up. Isn't that funny? It's like whoever had authority over us growing up, we internalized this voice, and it became the voice of our roommate. You can't do this. You can do that. You can't make a living as an artist. You have to get a good job and stay there for 10 years in order to be something. You have to go to college. You have to buy a house. You can't live abroad. These are all things sort of that we inherited from our parents, from our authority figures, and they became this roommate in our head. And we live by that. You all are awfully quiet out there. What do you think about this? Let's do this. Let's poke the roommate a little bit, shall we? So if you can, close your eyes, and I'm going to say a few things, and we're going to see if your roommate shows up. Okay? So here's the first one. People should be vaccinated. People should be vaccinated. Something chiming up in your head? Is that roommate giving its opinion? No, I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm not saying which side of the argument I land on. I'm just saying this is it's just words, right? But this is what the roommate does. It's constantly observing. It's constantly judging. It's constantly putting things in a bucket, whether they're right or wrong. Like I said before, what happens? We see this playing out on social media. But like people get hijacked by this roommate. They believe that it's them thinking, but what it is their conditioning Um, yeah, it's their conditioning. Hi, Carmen. Good to see you. Linda says, "That's funny. I thought you were going to say that, parents' voices, but I rebelled from my mother, but that still influenced my behavior." Yeah, I mean, we can't, Linda, we can't help it. Like when we're growing up, we look up to our parents to teach us about the world, right? And so we take what they tell us as truth. Who else are we supposed to believe until we become old enough to be free thinkers? But those voices get implanted almost like a parasite in our head. And I'm not saying they're all bad, but this is why we see behaviors passed down over generations. When I was in college, I actually studied biology and specifically genetics. I loved genetics. And we know in genetics, physical traits are passed down through genetics. But what's interesting is behaviors are passed down as well. Um, and it's because this voice gets implanted in us and we live by it. Scarlett says, "My roommate tells me I'm not good enough, skinny enough, rich enough, young enough. I have to be vigilant every day. I used to drink over it." Yup, Scarlett, I'm right there with you. I'm going to put that up there for everybody to see. Yes, you're right. That's the thing about the roommate. It never really has anything good to tell you. Why? Because it's always looking for a problem. It's kind of how the mind is. It's a survival mechanism. Like if we're able to spot trouble, if we're able to spot problems, then we can survive. But we can't allow that to rule our lives, right? And yes, people numb that. People try to numb the voice with alcohol. They try to numb it with shopping, sex, um, whatever can distract them. Um, and it really doesn't take care of the problem. Because what happens when you become a drinker to get rid of this? Then eventually the voice is going to say, "Well, look at you. You're an alcoholic." There's that problem again, right? Scarlett says, "How does one stop the voice?" That's a good question, Charlotte. So there's no stopping this voice. What we have to do is learn to live with it. And this comes from practice. So what this means is that meditation, getting still, whatever it is, and starting to build a separation between that voice and who we truly are, which is our consciousness, right? And we start becoming the observer of these thoughts. And the more that you become the observer of these thoughts, the more that you detach from them. So you can actually see them as a voice in your head. And the more space you put between you and that voice, it's almost like a buffer, like you don't have to act on it anymore. So right now, most of us, it's like thought, action. She cut me off in traffic. I need to get back at her. It's like almost like a knee jerk reaction. But when you practice this and you get good at putting a space between your thought and you, the true you, it's almost like you have this buffer where you don't have to act on that anymore. So I hate to tell you, there's no getting rid of this voice. It'll be with us forever. I think that's part of just thinking, but we can befriend it. We can see it for what it is. We no longer have to be victim to it, and that's a beautiful thing. So, if anybody, thank you for that, Scarlett. If anybody else has questions, comments, epiphanies, ahas, put them in the comment section. Um, it guides our experience tonight. Otherwise, you're going to have to listen to me read this, read and read and read. Carmen says, "Yes, I find that with practice, I can catch it sooner and question it." That's a good point, Carmen, questioning it. Sometimes I still choose to act on it, but at least I am acting knowingly. That's such a good point, Carmen. You're right. because then we're no longer a victim of it, right? We actually enter into this space of being able to choose. Because when you have a knee-jerk reaction, there's no choice there. Does that make sense? It's like the event happens and we act. We're hijacked. That's a good point, Carmen. Thank you. Scarlett, does everybody's voice spark negativity? For the most part, yes. Even if somebody is outwardly very positive, that doesn't mean that they have a positive roommate. They may be doing that to overcompensate for these voices. Look at who was that comedian that committed suicide? Robin Williams. What a joyful guy, right? He brought a lot of joy into the world. Who knew he was suffering in silence? I mean, I couldn't get in his head, but he was probably being tortured by this roommate. He probably didn't believe that it was separate from him. Pam says, yes, and that's why I like to be positive, because I like to see the good in everything. Not for me to be a good person or a good girl, Jason. So it's harder to tell someone something positive when they're saying negative stuff and not go with all the negative stuff they're spilling out and mention to them to be grateful. Positive is a good thing in my life along with love. It ranks high on my list for me. Okay, so Pam, so positivity is a value of yours. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's a great thing to bring into the world. Like we do need positivity. On the other hand, and I believe that all of life is a spectrum, and if you really believe that in the unity principles, that there's one power, there's one presence, it's God and it's good, even if it looks negative in the world, it is serving a positive purpose. So you make a good point, Pam. There's nothing wrong with being constantly positive, right? Aina is chiming in. Kabbalists have a technique to be proactive, to actually create a pause when a situation occurs and to let in the light of the Creator to enable an enlightened response. That's beautiful. That's exactly what we're talking about. Getting good. I mean, they call it a spiritual practice for a reason, right? We need to practice putting space between who we are, the consciousness of God, and these thoughts that are running through our head. And I really want you to hear that. When you can become good at that, and when you can become a master of that, you'll master your life. You'll become a master of your life because you're no longer being run by a program, the roommate in your head, which we talked about is the voice of your mother, the voice of your father, the voice of your authority figure growing up. And you actually become your own unique individual, conscious thinking being, making choices because you wanted to do it, not because you're being told by this roommate voice that is ancient. That's the word I was looking for. Ancient. And what I mean by that is, so imagine if this voice is your mother and father. Where did they get this voice? From their mother and father. And where did they get their voice? Their mother and father. So we're talking about a voice that has been passed down over generations, that is telling us how to live today in a world that is vastly different than when our great grandparents were alive. If we can break free from that, that's liberation. Wow, this is a good topic. I'll just break for a moment. I love all these questions and comments. This is fantastic, and I love that you all are digging deep and thinking on this. And what I want you to do, if you want to take this to the next level, is like for the next week, keep a piece of paper handy or use your phone and try to take notes about what your roommate is saying. If you can, this is what this is going to do, is this is going to create the space that we were talking about, right? So when you become vigilant about watching what the roommate is saying, then you're creating that space and that distance. So what I think you're going to find in doing this exercise is the roommate has the same thoughts every day. You're going to start to see a pattern. I'm not enough. I have to do this alone. You're going to see these themes. Carmen says freedom, hashtag freedom, hashtag roommate notes. Yes. Get to know your roommate, get it on paper. And the beauty is when you get it on paper, you freeze it in time and you're able to question it, like Carmen said before. Is the voice the ego, Diane says? In my opinion, it is, Diane, because as Singer says in his book, the voice has everything to do with the I. And what does the ego have to do with the I, right? And me. What is this? How does this benefit me? What does this have to do with me? Yes, it's the ego. And we say a lot of times at Unity, the ego isn't the devil. We don't like to, well, we don't believe in the devil at Unity, in case you're not familiar with the Unity principle. So we don't want to make something else the devil, right? So people end up thinking, oh, the way to liberation is killing off the ego, killing off the devil. No. Your ego plays a very specific role in your human body. It keeps you safe here on planet Earth and in the third dimension, right? What is important is we become friends with and try to understand the ego. Because it, just like the voice, is not going away. It never will. So we befriend it. We try to understand it. Why would it think that? Why would it say that? Like, of course. You get to a point where you're like, of course, that's why the roommate is saying that. You start to understand it. Aina says there are mind power techniques to counteract those negative thoughts. If you know of any, Aina, put them in the comment section. I'd love to see those. Meditation, awesome practice to get still. As you know, although guided meditations are great for this specific thing that you're practicing, I would say try to stay in silence. Try to be as still and silent as possible, because what you're doing is you're trying to observe your roommate. You're trying to catch your roommate in the act. Maybe have that piece of paper and pen next to you. And when you're in meditation, start writing down those thoughts that are coming. Freeze them in time. Get them on paper. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are nearing our end time here. So if you have any last minute comments, questions, put them in the chat. I really enjoyed my time tonight with you. Reverend Chris will be back next week at 6 p.m. right here. He'll be continuing talking about the book because we are on this journey on the Untethered Soul. So make sure you tune in. The thing about spiritual practices is this: it only works if you work it, right? So make sure you do your work and become liberated through it. Pam, you're so welcome. It was a joy to be with you tonight. Thank you for interacting with me. Scarlett says, when the roommate gets going, it has lead to isolation. I can't do it alone. Yes. That's why it's important, Scarlett, to start writing those things down, because the mind, the ego, the roommate is very cunning. When you try to figure it out in your mind, it'll send you through loops. It's really interesting how it does it, and you won't even be aware of it. So if we can freeze that in time and really look at it on paper, so that we can question it, it's so powerful. You're right. You don't have to do it alone. You can always call in the presence of of God, of a higher light of the universe to help you through. You're welcome, Carmen. Scarlett, you are welcome. Linda says, I don't trust those negative thoughts I replace with a positive affirmation. I don't trust those negative thoughts that I replace with a positive affirmation. Here's the thing about that, Linda, with affirmations. Chris is probably not going to like me saying this, but I have a sort of a love-hate relationship with affirmations, and this is why. If I say an affirmation that I don't truly believe, it seems not to work for me. And I'll give you an example. Like if I gain a couple extra pounds, and I'm using the affirmation, I'm slim and trim. Like if I don't believe that the affirmation is like, I can see that I'm just trying to trick myself. So what I would recommend is finding an affirmation that you can get behind, and try that on. Because you're right, you don't want to cover negative thoughts with a pile of affirmations. It's almost like sweeping them under the rug, right? Aina, yes. First observe the thought. Say to yourself, it is only a negative thought. You can affirm the exact opposite. Thank you. Yes. Um, yes. And you can also use denials. So that would be for another self-discovery, denials. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure being with you tonight. Thank you for tuning in again next week, 6 p.m. on Monday. Chris will be here with you, sharing more about the untethered soul. So have a wonderful night. Do your homework.